Well, while we're bringing up the deck, how many of you currently are? Do I really need that?
Yes.
Okay. How many of you in the room currently are involved in the program? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 organizations. How many of you are contemplating getting involved in the program? So about an equal number of hands, another 6 or so. Okay. We're just we asked that because those of you that did this case, those of you that did these case quality forms before, we ended up giving a pretty standard presentation of saying, hey, this is what this program is, and that, by way of doing these CMMI appraisals, you're a compliant organization, you get these particular regulatory benefits. Since we've done that many times, and we'll actually give you pointers to the MDICX webinars that we've had in the past, as well as articles from MedTech Insight, there's a lot of background information there that you can leverage to get on the nuts and the bolts of the program. So we're not going to do the MDAP or the CfQ VIP 101 today. We're going to do a little bit more information as to where we are right now.
Thanks, George. All right, so we're going to jump right into it. Maybe. Okay. So Cisco shared some of these measures already. Right now we have 45 actively enrolled sites representing 22 companies. So far we've appraised 44 facilities all time, 9 year to date. We're tracking on a couple of different things here to see, how well are we able to scale this program, how is it adopting, what's our velocity, things like that. So one of the things we're tracking is time from enrollment to appraisal. You'll see 2 numbers here actually. So our original goal was 90 days because we got asked the question, how long can I go before I have to get an appraisal? So we set a target. Right now we're averaging 116 days from enrollment to appraisal, with the shortest time being 41 days. And that's an improvement. We started out closer to 153, so we're getting better at this. You'll see a separate number here. So now we've done a number of second appraisals or reappraisals. And so we're also tracking, okay, so on average, how long does it take to go from your first appraisal to your second appraisal? Right now, we're targeting 1 year and we're averaging 369 days, so we're right on target. Currently, we have 20 certified appraisers for this program. There's an extra level of training and nuance that we have to share with our appraisers before they're ready to participate. And we have about another 20 that are pending. Now, in addition to training our own internal CMMI staff to be able to execute on this program, we're also training internal team members within the participating companies. So these people can learn what CMMI is, how to use it, how to drive continuous improvement using the model. And not only that, but they can also participate on the appraisal and help to better understand those results for their organization's benefit. It also saves them cost on these appraisals. So far we've had 37 of those folks trained. We have 3 more trainings this year in July, September, and November. The next one's in Ireland, and then we're going to do Pittsburgh, and then I think the last one will be in the DC area. We already have a number of people registered for those trainings as well. So right now, those trainings have been private. They've been focused on those organizations that are actually enrolled, those organizations that are enrolled in the program. However, because of the broad interest that we received on people, all right. Because of the broad interest we've received from people that aren't enrolled in the program who are interested in what this is all about and how CMMI can help me, we're looking at offering a public course to anyone who might be interested in how CMMI works in this program. So if you're interested, we'll have contact information at the end of these slides. And we've also had 9 FDA staffers go through this from different areas of FDA, and as Cisco alluded to, they're looking to have more people go through training so that they can better understand how CMMI is getting at this information and how that's helpful to reviewers. Okay, so we're also looking at program effectiveness metrics. So The first one was, how well are we able to scale this and execute on this? Now this is sort of how well is this actually working? So normally I do a cumulative set of metrics because we had all first-year appraisals last year. Now that we're seeing some second appraisals, I've actually separated this information so that you can see what things look like for people going through their first appraisal and how that changes as they're going through their second appraisal. So for baseline appraisals, we've had 199 survey responses, and we ask, okay, what's your experience with the appraisal? Positive, negative, neutral? 91% positive. So it's been fairly consistent throughout the year. We haven't really seen that dip below 90. In terms of value to product quality, 85% said yes, the appraisal identified areas of improvement that would directly impact product quality. 98% saw no conflict with compliance, and in fact, many said that this was complementary to compliance and would help them improve their compliance activities. And outside of impact to product quality, 94% of respondents said that the appraisal identified things that would be a value add to the organization beyond that scope. And for those who are familiar with the Net Promoter Score, this asks on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this to a colleague? And we have a plus 54, so that takes the people who said 9 or 10, minus the people who said 6 or less, and gets you sort of a net. So of the 46 people who have answered this question, who've gone through the baseline appraisal, we have a plus 54 on a scale of negative 100 to positive 100. Now let's look at reappraisals. Interestingly, these numbers go up with reappraisals. So you saw on the last slide, it was about 91% positive. For reappraisals, it's 96% positive experience. I think this is because people understand what it is we're trying to do, and they're starting to see some of the value that's coming out of the results of these appraisals. Similar for the Net Promoter Score, you'll see it's plus 70 here as compared to the plus 54 for baseline appraisals. So we're seeing that as people continue in this program, they're getting more out of it. So we actually asked a different set of questions for people going through a reappraisal, and one of the ones that we dived a little bit deeper into here is, well, what is the impact to product quality that you've seen? So we're seeing things, and I've just tried to summarize some of the comments that we're getting in our surveys, and we're seeing things like, well, we actually have a better understanding now of what product quality means to our company and how we actually produce that. We're seeing common language across our teams, which helps us improve our communications and our handoffs between departments. We're seeing better process improvement. These different perspectives give us new ideas for how we can continue to improve. We now have a better pathway towards mitigating non-conforming products. Things like we now see increased customer satisfaction through a reduction in waste in terms of how much time it's taking and what our product yield is. Things like increased rigor and predictability in new product development, and also greater focus on understanding the measurement systems that we have in place so that we know when we're effective. So this is some interesting stuff that we're now starting to see in the second year of this pilot.
So in addition to executing these appraisals, we have several working groups that are made up of participants in the program, industry participants in the program, members from FDA, and senior appraisers. Thanks. You just gave this to me so I could point it and the slides would go, so I could join that party. Right. So our additional, we have 6 working groups at current. The first one here is additional regulatory benefits. And so, as you would expect, you saw Cisco outline several of the benefits that are currently provided: the waiving of routine inspections, the streamlined 30-day change notice, site transfer. But we're also working through what, in this working group, what additional regulatory benefits we could potentially provide to industry and under what particular conditions. I'll talk a little bit about that more in an upcoming slide. We have a performance measurement working group. So I saw Marla Phillips here from Xavier, and I was just thinking about the history that we've had in trying to identify what are key measures of quality, or and then those of you that many of you have probably been involved in the POQA working group that MDIC had, and we're now in a chapter of that as well ourselves, with asking our participants to provide performance measures back related to safety, effectiveness, reliability, and availability of their particular products. And it's a really interesting conversation because we've gotten a lot of different answers as to how different organizations measure those things. And so with that working group, we're again, industry and FDA, we're trying to bring everybody together to come to some sort of understanding as to are there things that are common, what things are different, and how we can move forward on that. We'll talk a little bit about that in an upcoming slide as well. Reappraisals. So yes, you heard from Kim. We have baseline appraisals, and we've had second-year appraisals. We have organizations coming up on their third-year appraisal, and there's an active conversation as to what does that look like. We have multi-site appraisals. So the view the program initially had was let's go and do an appraisal for a site, and the benefits would be then applied to that site. Well, as we all know, sometimes within our total product lifecycle or within the value stream, you have your regulatory folks in one location, you have your R&D in a different location, you have your manufacturing in another location, and then maybe you have your support someplace else. And so industry is coming back and saying, we'd like to consider some sort of appraisal across a multitude of sites, and also be able to get the benefit at that multitude of sites. So how do we go about executing appraisals in a multi-site fashion? We'll talk a little bit about that in an upcoming slide as well as to what we've done there. There's also two other working groups of these. There's the program features working group, which is just to continue to identify, develop, test, and finalize additional features of this program. We're always looking for feedback from back from the FDA, from our appraisers, from our industry participants as to our particular operations. And then medical device context. So the CMMI model, those of you that are familiar with it, it's been around in excess of 2 decades, and it's not just for software, and it's not just for the DoD, and it's not just for automotive or just for medical devices. And so the language of the CMMI model is agnostic to any one of those particular industries. And so there's an ongoing conversation with industry and our participants in this working group as to how do we further tailor the questions that we ask so that it makes the most sense in our particular appraisals, right? DHF is a term that we all know, but you would not see it specifically referenced within the CMMI model. So how do we turn how we're executing appraisals more into a medical device context for greater effectiveness? All right, so now I'm going to do this click thing. All right, so yesterday, again, we're in addition to those working groups, we're very much actively trying to pull back feedback and information from our participants, the people that have gone through these particular appraisals. And we had a participant work group actually here yesterday. About a dozen of us collected. All of the participants were invited. And we basically said, look, there's some big picture items that we're working on as to where we're going with the program. And we just want to have an intimate conversation with you as to where do you think these things should go. So the additional regulatory benefits, there's a lot of interest in additional PMA benefit, right, for the manufacturing module. And those of you that were in the workshop, I'm probably going to call on you to add some of your commentary on this as well. And essentially, the pain point that industry is feeling is when we submit an original PMA for the manufacturing module, we basically back up the truck of our entire quality system and we submit all of that to FDA, and that hurts a lot. So what can we do if we're a participant in this program? What can we do to streamline that? What is really necessary from FDA's perspective? Absolutely. And what things can we pull out? And so that's a direction that we're going in. And it really comes down to the same sort of thing that you've heard all morning, right? Even in the cyber world, right? Like what do we need to absolutely have for the FDA to see? What do they need transparency in? What confidence and trust do they also get by way of these organizations being in appraisals and also providing these performance reports? And then with that, with the performance measures, we have collected 20 of these We've collected 20 of these from our participants. We collect those in the second year. We don't come right out and say, give us your performance measures in the first year, but we start collecting those in the second year of appraisals. We collected 20 of those. And so we've started to stack that data and basically look at what are common ways that these organizations address safety and effectiveness and reliability and availability. And guess what? There's some things that you would expect to see that are all very common. Typical compliance measures, right? Number of CAPAs, number of nonconformities, number of complaints, complaint rate. And so the conversation that we're getting here out of this working group and from this participant workshop is how do we move that conversation forward so that it's more of a quality measure from the patient's perspective? And how do we make it so that it's more a proactive measure than just a reactive measure, right? We can all agree that a complaint is pretty much a reactive measure. So how do we shift that? So we're going to look to, that's where we're looking to go in that, with that particular working group. With reappraisals, and Conrad used the term human touch, and I think that's really important because there's significant different engagement with our second appraisal, as you saw from the feedback that Kim provided, because that first appraisal, it's very much the arms are crossed. It's the typical auditor type response. Even if the organization's dealing with their second or third or fourth facility in the program, you go to that new facility, and it's, if you ask, do you know what time it is? They say yes. That's the end of it, right? And so I think really something we're really proud of with this program is that, and part of the reason why we have not just opened this up to all the appraisers that we have certified with the CMMI, but very carefully, is because of that human touch, so that we're getting people to open up with their particular work. We've also, it's been very much interview based, right? But we're shifting that as well on our reappraisals so that we're getting more to having the organization provide us with objective evidence. So yes, that might mean after 2 years of appraisals, we're actually getting to documentation review. But it's done in a way where they're not just sliding SOP 1, 2, 3, 4 uncontrolled and printed across the table to you, but really sharing that along with their shift turnover meetings or gamble walks, whatever it is that you want to do, so that we can provide a higher fidelity appraisal and greater results back to the organization. But that's a shift. We can't do that in year one with our appraisals. We're talking about that maybe occurring in year two, year three, after we've done a couple of those. And so our task now is to really operationalize that with the CMMI PMO. And then multi-site appraisals. So we've done 5 of these, and they've all been experiments to some degree, and something that we've carefully vetted with that participant, the appraiser, the CMMI Institute, and of course the FDA. And the situations we end up with are, of course, we want to say, hey, we're all under one quality system. So all of our sites in this multi-site, they all operate exactly the same. We're like Papa John's. We're a franchise. Everything looks exactly the same. But we know that's not really the case, right? And so what we are seeing is, in some cases, we have organizations that are hugely geographically separate from a multi-site perspective, right? Even we had one multi-site where the appraisal was across different continents, but we had a set of activities that were occurring that were the design at one location, and then you had a set of activities that were occurring essentially the manufacturing. And how do we look across those in a multi-site? We've had other ones where the facilities are in different countries, but those countries are connected. They are operating under the same quality system. And then we've also had ones where like the facilities are 15 miles apart. And so again, we're just the same thing that we're doing with the other things that we're learning. We're stacking all this data, and we're coming back to our FDA participants. We're coming back to industry, and we're asking, hey, are there guidelines here that we absolutely need to identify in executing a multi-site appraisal? Or are there things that we should absolutely never do, right? Which is like, hey, we're not going to just go look at an appraisal for one site and then say this entire company that has 120 sites worldwide, now you're in the program, right? So we're working on that stacking of that data. So for those of you that have raised your hand saying interested in participating in the program, an additional benefit to all the things that Kim identified and Cisco has identified in the other slides is you get skin in the game in helping define where the program goes as well. You get to be involved with these working groups and these participant workshops to say, this is what I want these things to look like. Just give you the prompt. Anybody that was in the participant working group yesterday, anybody want to add to any of that?
George, I think the only thing, I appreciate, between FDA, between CMMI participating and giving their insights, but also the industry collaboration is that an important part of the case for quality, especially as we transition from a pilot to a program, is an open-mindedness on it's still evolving. There's still a lot to learn. We're in learning and change and grow mode. And, it's great to see that we have the framework to be able to have those discussions, to be open about what's working, not working, and chartering, how we proceed differently or how we make things better. And I think that's going to continue to add a lot of value as this continues to grow.
This is Robbie. I just wanted to say, we got to recognize how far we've come. When we started the program, there was some uncertainty about where this would go with respect to creating a safe space and disclosure. And I got to say, now having gone through one of these, I'm looking forward to going through another one of these because I'm seeing that there's some benefit from it, and there's also a real desire to do something for the quality of the product and for the safety of the patient from a foundational perspective, and not at all from a compliance perspective, but to take it beyond compliance. So I think that's big kudos to my experience with it.
So those of you that are thinking about enrolling in the program, so Rob Becker from Edwards and Robbie from Illumina, you can come and ask Cam or myself or Cisco, but hearing it from industry brethren is always, I think it's more helpful. Catherine, also Catherine Merrill from Medtronic, also a great resource to tap into.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, because you guys have 6 people who are considering it potentially, it is exactly
what they say it's going to be. That's the #1 thing we hear from participants. Like in our organization, at the end, the last day of the appraisal, they look at us and go, "Why did we freak out?" So there's this general sense that it's like an audit or what the FDA is setting a trap. Like it really is exactly what they say it's going to be. It is appraisal. It's all about continuous improvement. And to get down on the ground floor and help design the program is just an opportunity I would say don't miss. So.
Hi, Jackie from Baxter. I think we currently have 6 sites and we have both US and OUS. When I think about multi-site appraisals, I personally, and maybe because we're so big, would not want a multi-site appraisal, because I can tell you 2 sites that are 1 state apart from each other are night and day in terms of their maturity, and we've seen that. So while I love the idea of trying to make it more streamlined, from the perspective of really wanting each site to develop and mature, I would hate to rob a site that's weaker just because another site is stronger. And I agree that it's been a great process.
I think your feedback actually echoes some of the feedback that we heard from some of our participants in regards to, okay, how can I execute one of these multi-site appraisals and still then get the appropriate feedback specific to that particular site? And part of this, I think there's some learning that we've gathered from that, and some information that we can share back within this working group. We're going to be a little careful because we're trying to do this in a way that's not attributing that. We're still trying to hold that data in confidence, right? But there were circumstances here in which it made sense for these organizations. I think it was value add, and they could still improve those particular sites. But I think there's some dial turning we need to do there as well.
Just to add to that really quick, I think to George's point, for those organizations where it maybe made sense to look at, how does this whole value stream look? In those cases, when we are able to look at them as a whole, there's like an additional set of feedback we can provide to how those sites interact with one another. But we are actively thinking about how do we provide that overall holistic feedback as well as targeted feedback.
So this may be a question more for the people that are participating as opposed to the group that's up there. Obviously, there's a great regulatory benefit, and I think that's why a lot of early people jumped in to see, how that would translate into benefits back to the company that you could realize along those lines. But taking that out of the way, let's say that there was no benefit from an FDA perspective in audits or reviews. I'd be interested to hear what would drive a company to continue to do this without that regulatory benefit? What are you feeling internally? What are you observing? What are you experiencing based on the outcome of this that leads you to a pharmaceutical site being evaluated and a non-regulated site being evaluated? There must be some observed benefit within the company.
So I know from our perspective, it gets back to, you really have to decide if are you operating as the best organization you possibly can be. And outside of, if you focus just on product specifics, if you focus just on, say, compliance, you're missing a whole lot of your culture, you're missing a whole lot of how a very complex dynamic environment actually has to come together and work together. You're missing a lot of that, that part of observation of your system. And so it really gives you feedback on that breadth of your organization in terms of what's working and not working, so that you can look at, it's all got to work efficiently and effectively. And the more you look at the broader system and where it's coming together, how people interact with their work, and the more you're open to that feedback, you have opportunities that you didn't realize were there to perform better.
I was just gonna agree with that most of the time we go to a site the first time and they give us quality people to help coordinate it, and everybody assumes it's a quality activity. But at the end of the week, typically the site leaders and the staff say, this is an organizational excellence program. This is more about continuous improvement for the entire organization than a quality program. It helps the whole company or organization.
Well, while the microphone's being passed, one of the things that, and I think there's another question related to this, in terms of, is there going to be data sharing about lessons learned and best practices that could be the device industry from this program that can be shared across the board? And the answer is yes. We're doing that right now with our participants in some of the working groups that I talked about in terms of, hey, this is how these organizations are shifted.
This is how these organizations are even considering how they measure safety effectiveness. So that's just a clear example of how there's some of that sharing that's occurring as well. Additionally, with these organizations, we're reaching out to them because everybody's got a unique story. What's your case study with this particular program? And we're going to be looking to build that particular library so that it can also be shared back to all of you.
I have a question for Cisco. So as you see this being operationalized eventually instead of a pilot program, do you see the ORA inspection similar to, how this is going to, this appraisal is going to be done?
So that's a really good question. One that, we actually had a lot of the participating companies come in and share their experiences with us at the director very recently. One of the big takeaways that he put on the table afterwards is, how do we shift our activities, right, to be more like this? There's a way and potentially an opportunity to do that. We still got to remember that our ORA investigators still serve a very distinct purpose from a evidentiary gallery standpoint, from a compliance standpoint, enforcement activity. It's never going to be without some significant changes to regulations, that type of methodology and approach. So we want to enable them to be able, because a lot of what we actually took when we built this program to begin with came from feedback from the investigators. Things that they said they wish they would be able to do, but they just cannot do under reg right now. So the want is there, the desire is there, right? The capability among them, the skill set's there. It's where are the bounds and limits of what we can implement and do and still keep what is the, I guess, the real mandate for the ORA inspector.
I think that's really hard. FDA is a law enforcing body, right? And so the analogy that I use there, my teenage kid says, I want to go out, can I borrow the car? And then I say, is your room clean? I am now a law enforcing body. It immediately goes to compliance mode right there. So I think as soon as you're dealing with something that has law enforcement in it, and I think we can be creative in thinking we could get around that. Some of the things, it's just there's a desire there, but I think it's hard because there is that weight when if you have a regulator there from the FDA saying, I'm here. They can be as nice and smile and do human touch with stuff as much as possible. But if there is the possibility of the hammer, you're going to treat that particular experience different. And I compliment FDA in this program. One of the things that's really hard for organizations to understand, that's part of the shift that Catherine's talking about, is FDA has been very rigorous in saying the data that you're collecting from these appraisals, the specific findings that you have at a Catherine site or at one of Jackson's sites at Baxter's, we don't want to see that. That's for them to address, because we don't want to ever get into the situation where we're thinking, George goes on an appraisal, he feeds that information back to Cisco, and then Cisco's knocking on the door. They've been very good in that, so that we're not leveraging a law enforcement type activity in that way. So.
If I may follow up on that, I think that's the whole broader conversation with Dr. Woodcock about the 21st century quality initiative and the vision of going beyond compliance. And I mean that's, to me, it's the agency's role to evolve itself into something like this rather than an evidence gathering activity. When I agree with you, when inspections become evidence gathering, everybody kind of hunker down, right? So I think it's, to me, I think CEDAR is moving in that direction, in my view, in the recent presentations they gave publicly about evolving the concept of operations and the whole alignment.
Well, I would actually suggest, some of my appraisals have occurred in pharma organizations. I've been a part of that, but I think there might be, we can wait for CEDAR or CBER or one of the other divisions to say, yes, we're going to create a program like this, and they could be the initiate, but I'll put the challenge out there that if you're on that side, you could say, we want to execute an appraisal like that, and then bring that information back to those divisions to say, look, we did something like this. Would this work for you? And start to iterate towards maybe something that could go in that direction.
One last question.
Yes. So my question to you, Catherine or Jackie, CMMI leaves, they do appraisal, reappraisal. Folks within the organization change, right? Within 2 to 5 years. What's happening with sustainability? How do you sustain that? From training programs, SOPs, how do you sustain that?
Are you asking changes in CMI or within the
company? I think
Within the company.
Yeah.
Like, how do you maintain that culture, or what you've learned, what you know now, and how do you want to apply it?
For us, we've created an internal corporate team that sort of governs over it and makes sure that all of the sites are working toward each of the line items that were scored. And then we try to share it horizontally across the 8 sites that are in the program. If we had our way, we'd sign up all 70 sites tomorrow.
Yeah.
But you have the personnel to support that. And it's similar for us. They leave with the opportunities identified for us, and we have our pilot sites that get together.
So there's a governance body that
Yeah.
really makes things moving forward. Okay.
And it's important when you're doing that change management across the organization, because people outside of those sites that are participating are interested in what's going on, because it's such a different way of doing things. And so part of it's communication, education, and training.
I just want to also add that that's a perfect question. It's one of the things that's actually built into the CMMI framework in version 2.0, which is the latest release, is this concept of how to make things persistent and habitual. Doug was sort of speaking to that in the cybersecurity panel. But it's this concept of, in times of high stress or high turnover, how do we make sure that things continue on the way that they have been continuing in the ways that they're supposed to be continuing? So those sorts of best practices for how you make that happen are now built into the model.
So I know we're supposed to be, from a time perspective, we're supposed to be back up to lunch. And so excellent questions. We'll certainly be here throughout lunch to continue this talk. In this deck, there are links to a variety of presentations that have occurred over the past year that will get you the nuts and bolts in terms of how an appraisal is executed. Sean's here from MedTech Insight. He did a whole series of articles that are very informative. I think they're still open for reading. Podcasts that are up there with Cisco. I would definitely suggest this. The thing I really like about the MDICX webinars is that we've tried to, with each of those, dial in a industry participant so that you hear from a Catherine Merrill, you hear from a Rob Becker, you hear from your brothers and sisters in industry, because certainly FDA can stand up here and say this is a great program. The CMI Institute set up here and say this is a great program, but I think hearing it from your industry brethren is best. And then finally, before we break for lunch, when I look out here, there's a lot of familiar faces. Obviously, not just people that have been participants in the program, but those of you that have been through this over the years, and all of you have contributed to moving this program forward. And so I thank you for that, and I continue to encourage you to remain involved. But thanks for the time.